My name is Zara Khan, and for as long as I can remember, the world spoke to me in scents. Not just the obvious ones, the sweet, earthy aroma of rain on dry soil, the comforting vanilla of old books, the sharp, invigorating tang of pine forests. No, for me, scents were narratives, complex tapestries woven from invisible threads. I could discern the subtle bitterness of fear in a crowded room, the cloying sweetness of a secret festering beneath a polite smile, the metallic, almost acrid tang of a lie clinging to a whispered word. At 32, I was a master perfumer, a nose, as they called us in the esoteric circles of haute perfumery. My laboratory, a sanctuary of gleaming glass vials, precise pipettes, and exotic essences from every corner of the globe, was tucked away in the quietest corner of the city. It was a place where the clamor of the outside world faded, replaced by the silent symphony of molecules. My creations were not mere perfumes. They were bespoke olfactory experiences, crafted for the elite, designed to capture not just a fleeting mood, but a cherished memory, a burning desire, the very essence of a soul. My name, though whispered with reverence in exclusive circles, remained largely unseen, much like the delicate, ephemeral molecules I worked with. I crafted dreams. I bottled emotions. I read the invisible language of scent the way others read faces, line by intricate line, searching for the hidden truths, the unspoken stories.
For years, that was my life.
A quiet, almost monastic existence, filled with the profound poetry of chemical compounds and the silent, profound stories they told. I didn't seek out drama. Indeed, I actively avoided it. And drama, it seemed, reciprocated, leaving me in my peaceful solitude. The quiet felt like an embrace, a comforting blanket, and I let myself believe that peace and absence were one and the same. Then the call came. It wasn't an invitation, polite and optional. It was a summons, delivered with the unmistakable authority of old money and unyielding power. The voice on the other end was that of Mrs. Layla Al-Fayed, the formidable matriarch of the Al-Fayed dynasty. Her tone, sharp, precise, and utterly devoid of warmth, requested my immediate presence at their ancestral estate, Al-Fayed Manor. The task, she stated with chilling clarity, was to recreate a lost fragrance, the signature scent of her recently deceased mother, Layla Al-Fayed. A scent, she emphasized, that had vanished with its wearer, a final, ethereal whisper into the void. I almost declined.
Twice.
My intuition, a subtle prickle at the back of my neck, warned me away. But what stopped me wasn't the allure of prestige, nor the exorbitant fee she casually mentioned. It was the name itself, Layla Al-Fayed. A legend in her own right, a titan of philanthropy, a patron of the arts, a woman whose grace was as renowned as her exquisite taste. And her perfume, a mythical blend rumored to be as unique and captivating as her spirit. It was said to be a scent that commanded attention, yet soothed the soul, a paradox in a bottle. I wasn't going for the money. My work already afforded me a comfortable life. I wasn't going for the challenge. Every day in my lab was a challenge. I was going to breathe life back into a ghost, to understand a woman through the most intimate and revealing of her expressions. I told myself I'd stay a week, perhaps two, to complete the intricate work. I didn't make it 3 days before the first discordant note hit me, a subtle off-key chord in the symphony of scents that was Al-Fayed Manor. Al-Fayed Manor was a sprawling monument to old money and even older secrets. Its polished marble floors echoed with hushed whispers, and the eyes of ancient portraits seemed to follow me, filled with knowing silence. The air itself was heavy, a blend of antique wood, expensive floral arrangements, and a faint, almost imperceptible undercurrent of something stale. Eleanor, a woman carved from ice and ambition, greeted me with a polite, almost clinical warmth. Her smile was a practiced gesture, her eyes, the color of a winter sky, held no genuine light. She handed me a small, ornate crystal bottle, its stopper still in place, half filled with a dark, viscous liquid. "This is all that remains, Miss Khan," she stated, her voice as smooth and cold as the marble beneath our feet. "My mother's last bottle. We need it replicated exactly. A tribute, you understand." I took the bottle. Its cold weight was a stark contrast to the warmth of the cherished memories it was supposed to evoke. The scent, even from the stopper, was faint, almost imperceptible. A ghost of a ghost, indeed. I retreated to the temporary lab they had set up for me, a sunlit room overlooking a meticulously manicured rose garden. My tools were laid out with surgical precision: a gas chromatograph, a mass spectrometer, an array of pipettes, beakers, and my most trusted companion, my own highly trained nose. I began my work, a delicate dance of scientific analysis and intuitive artistry. The initial analysis revealed the expected: rare Cambodian oud, the velvety richness of Bulgarian rose, a hint of ambergris, and the sweet, resinous warmth of benzoin. Classic, elegant, a truly masterful blend. But something was off. A subtle dissonance, a faint, almost imperceptible undertone that prickled at the back of my throat, a sensation akin to a false note in a perfect melody. It wasn't part of the known blend. It was something else. Something foreign. Something wrong. I spent hours, then days, meticulously dissecting the remaining drops, my concentration absolute, my senses on high alert. The Al-Fayed family, meanwhile, moved around me like silent specters, their presence a constant, unsettling hum beneath the surface of the Manor's opulent calm. Eleanor, ever watchful, her eyes like chips of ice, seemed to materialize and disappear at will. Her brother, Omar, a man of forced joviality, carried a perpetual shadow in his eyes, a nervous energy that belied his easy laughter. And Layla's personal assistant, a young woman named Sofia, seemed to exist in a perpetual state of anxiety, flinching at every sudden sound, her gaze darting nervously. I requested access to Layla's personal effects, anything that might still carry the lingering traces of her scent. Her silk scarves, her leather-bound journals, her favorite armchair, even the pages of her most beloved books. Eleanor provided them, reluctantly, as if each item was a piece of a puzzle she didn't want me to solve. On her silk scarves, I found faint traces of the main notes: the rose, the oud, the benzoin. But on a small, exquisitely embroidered handkerchief, tucked away in a hidden compartment of her antique writing desk, I found it again. That same discordant note.
Stronger this time.
Unmistakable. A bitter almond. My blood ran cold. Not a natural component of any perfume. A scent I knew, a scent that perfumers, by the very nature of their work, were trained to identify.
It was the scent of cyanide.
The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. My hands trembled, almost dropping the precious handkerchief, the silent bearer of such a terrible truth. Layla Al-Fayed hadn't simply died of old age or a sudden illness, as the family had publicly stated. She had been poisoned, and the last remaining drops of her beloved perfume, the very essence I was tasked to recreate, held the silent, deadly signature of her killer. The solitude of my lab, once a haven of peace and creativity, now felt like a suffocating cage. Every rustle of leaves outside the window, every distant chime of the antique grandfather clock in the hall, seemed to whisper of danger, of a truth too terrible to bear. I was no longer just a perfumer. I was an accidental detective, holding a truth that could shatter a powerful family, a truth that could cost me everything. I had to be careful, extremely careful. I continued my work, feigning focus on the known notes, meticulously separating and analyzing them. But beneath the surface, my mind raced, my senses on high alert. I secretly, painstakingly, isolated the bitter almond compound, running it through every test imaginable. I needed proof. Undeniable, scientific proof. I needed to understand how it had been administered, how it had been so cunningly hidden within the very fragrance that was Layla's identity. The next day, I approached Sofia, the personal assistant. Her eyes, perpetually wide with a fear I now understood, seemed to hold a desperate plea. "Sofia, I began gently, my voice low, almost a whisper. Can you tell me about Layla's routine? Especially regarding her perfume and her morning rituals? Sofia hesitated, her gaze darting nervously towards the closed lab door, as if expecting Eleanor to materialize at any moment. She always applied it herself, Miss Khan. Every morning, after her tea. It was her little ritual. And her tea? I pressed, my heart pounding a silent rhythm against my ribs. Who prepared it? The house staff, usually. But sometimes Mrs. Eleanor or Mr. Omar would bring it to her room. Especially in her last few weeks, when she was feeling weaker. A cold knot tightened in my stomach, a familiar chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The family.
It was always the family.
The pieces were beginning to align, forming a terrifying picture. I needed to get my hands on Layla's tea set, her teacup, anything that might have come into contact with the poison.
But how?
Eleanor's watchful eyes were everywhere, her presence a constant, oppressive weight. I knew I couldn't confront them directly. Not yet. A direct accusation would be met with denial, dismissal, and likely, my swift removal from the manor. I needed to play their game, to move silently, subtly, like the invisible molecules of my trade. I needed to find the source of the bitter almond, not just in the perfume, but in the manor itself, to trace its path from source to victim. The scent was a whisper, yes, but it was leading me to a scream. I spent the next few days observing, listening, my senses heightened to an almost unbearable degree. The manor staff, loyal and discreet, offered snippets of information, innocent details that, through my new, terrifying lens, took on sinister meanings. Layla's sudden, rapid decline. The hurried funeral, a blur of hushed condolences and forced smiles. The family's almost too perfect composure, a facade that now seemed to crack under the weight of my suspicion. The bitter almond scent, faint but persistent, seemed to cling to certain areas of the house. The grand library, where Layla often read, its leather-bound books exuding a scent of wisdom and age. Her private study, filled with the aroma of old paper and dried flowers. And most disturbingly, the small, antique silver tea caddy in the dining room, its polished surface reflecting the flickering candlelight like a silent accusation. I needed access to that caddy. And I needed to do it without raising suspicion, without alerting the predators who now roamed these opulent halls. I decided to use my profession as a cover, a shield behind which I could conduct my dangerous investigation. Mrs. Al-Fayed, I addressed Eleanor one evening, during a formal dinner where the air was thick with unspoken tensions, the clinking of silverware a brittle counterpoint to the silence. I believe to truly capture the profound essence of your mother's perfume, I need to understand her daily rituals more intimately. Her tea, for instance. Could I perhaps examine the specific tea leaves she preferred? Sometimes, the subtle aroma of a favorite tea can inspire a complementary note, a hidden facet to the fragrance. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion in their icy depths. But she was a woman of appearances. She couldn't refuse without appearing uncooperative, without casting a shadow on her carefully constructed image of devotion. Of course, Miss Khan. Sofia will assist you. She knows mother's preferences best. Sofia, pale and trembling, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else, hope, led me to the dining room. As she reached for the antique silver tea caddy, her hand, almost imperceptibly, brushed against mine. A tiny, folded slip of paper, no bigger than a postage stamp, passed between us. Later, in the sterile solitude of my lab, my heart hammering against my ribs, I unfolded it. A single word, scrawled in hurried, almost illegible handwriting. Garden. The garden. Layla's beloved rose garden. I remembered the bitter almond scent, stronger on the embroidered handkerchief. Had it been applied there? Was there a connection? A place where a secret could be hidden, a crime committed, away from the prying eyes of the manor? That night, under the cloak of darkness, guided only by the faint glow of the moon and the urgent beat of my own pulse, I ventured into the rose garden. The air was cool, fragrant with the night-blooming jasmine and the heavy sweetness of the roses. I searched, my small flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive shadows, until I found it. Tucked beneath a sprawling, ancient rose bush, its thorns like grasping fingers, lay a small, discarded vial. Empty. But the faint, unmistakable scent of bitter almond still clung to its glass, a ghostly echo of its deadly contents. And etched into the base, almost invisible to the naked eye, a tiny, stylized E. Eleanor. It was her. The realization hit me with the force of 1,000 crashing waves, stealing my breath, leaving me gasping in the cool night air. The Ice Queen, the ambitious daughter, had poisoned her own mother.
But why?
The motive, the cold, calculating cruelty of it, was almost incomprehensible. And how could I prove it? The vial was crucial, yes, but it wasn't enough. It was circumstantial. I needed more. I needed to connect Eleanor directly to the poison and to Layla's death in a way that was undeniable, irrefutable. I returned to my lab, my mind a whirlwind of terrifying possibilities. The perfume,
The tea. The bitter almond.
it all had to fit, to form a cohesive, damning narrative. I remembered Sofia's nervous demeanor, her subtle warning, the desperate hope in her eyes. She knew something. She had to. She was a witness, perhaps even an unwilling accomplice. The next morning, I confronted Sofia, not with accusations, but with a quiet certainty that transcended words. "Sofia," I said, holding up the empty vial, its faint bitter almond scent still clinging to my fingers. "I know what this is. And I know what happened to Layla Al-Fayed." Her face drained of all color, turning ashen. Tears welled in her eyes, silent rivers tracing paths down her pale cheeks. Her body trembled uncontrollably. I saw her," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile thread of sound. "Mrs. Eleanor. She put something in the tea. Just a few drops. She said it was a new herbal supplement for Layla's heart, to help her sleep." "And the perfume?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil within me. "Did she ever touch Layla's perfume bottle?" "Yes," Sofia choked out, her voice catching. "The day before, she said she wanted to try it, to remember her mother's scent. She was in Layla's room for a long time. She even asked me to leave the room for a few minutes." It was all coming together, the horrifying pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Eleanor had used the perfume bottle as a delivery mechanism, a cunning way to introduce the poison without suspicion. The bitter almond scent, masked by the powerful floral notes of Layla's signature fragrance, would have been almost impossible to detect by anyone but a trained nose, a perfumer. I had my proof. The vial, Sofia's tearful testimony, and the undeniable chemical signature in the perfume itself. But how to expose it? The Al-Fayed family was too powerful, too well-connected, their influence reaching into every corner of the city's elite. A direct accusation would be dismissed as the ramblings of an outsider, and I, Zara Khan, would be silenced, perhaps permanently. I needed a plan, a subtle, elegant, and utterly undeniable plan. A plan that spoke the language of scent, a language only I truly understood. I returned to my lab, not with fear, but with a cold, steady resolve that hardened my spirit. I would recreate Layla's perfume, yes, but I would also create something else. A truth serum, bottled in a fragrance. I would use the very art that defined me, the very essence of my being, to expose the lie that had festered in the heart of this family. The gala was set for the following week, a grand affair designed to celebrate Layla Al-Fayed's enduring legacy. The manor was transformed, glittering with crystal chandeliers, overflowing with exotic flowers, and filled with the city's most influential figures. Eleanor, radiant in a gown of emerald green, moved through the crowd, accepting condolences and accolades with practiced ease, her smile a mask of serene grief. Omar, her brother, stood by her side, a picture of solemn grief, though his eyes still held that nervous, darting quality. Sofia, pale and withdrawn, served champagne, her hands trembling slightly as she offered trays to the guests. I, Zara Khan, the celebrated perfumer, was introduced as the guest of honor, the artist who had miraculously brought Layla's beloved scent back to life. I carried a small, velvet-lined box. Inside, nestled on satin, were two identical crystal bottles. One, the perfect recreation of Layla's perfume, its liquid shimmering with the promise of memory. The other, my truth serum, its contents a silent, deadly weapon. I approached Eleanor, a polite smile on my face, my heart a drumbeat against my ribs. "For you, Mrs. Al-Fayed," I said, my voice calm, steady, my eyes meeting hers, holding her gaze. "A tribute to your mother's enduring spirit, a scent to forever cherish her memory." She accepted it with a thin, triumphant smile, a flicker of victory in her icy eyes. Then, I turned to the assembled guests, my voice carrying clearly across the hushed ballroom. "And for all of you," I announced, holding up the second bottle, its crystal gleaming under the chandeliers, "a special limited edition. A fragrance inspired by Layla Al-Fayed's profound honesty. A scent that reveals all." A ripple of polite applause, a murmur of curiosity. Eleanor's smile faltered, a tiny crack in her perfect facade. I pressed the atomizer. A fine mist, almost invisible, diffused into the air. The scent was subtle at first, a delicate blend of jasmine and rose, the familiar top notes of Layla's perfume. But beneath it, for those with a discerning nose, for those whose senses were attuned to the hidden language of molecules, was the unmistakable, escalating note of bitter almond. A silent alarm, spreading through the opulent hall, carried on the very air we breathed. I watched Eleanor's face. Her eyes widened, a tremor ran through her hand, causing her champagne flute to clink against the tray. The scent, designed to amplify the truth, was working its insidious magic, a silent accusation. Omar, standing beside her, suddenly looked pale, his forced joviality replaced by a stark, naked fear. Sofia, from across the room, met my gaze, a silent understanding passing between us, a shared burden finally lifted. The fragrance of a lie was finally speaking its truth. The room, once filled with polite chatter, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation, began to fall silent. Not because of my words, but because of the invisible message carried on the air. The scent of bitter almond, once a secret, was now a confession, permeating every corner of the grand ballroom. And in that profound, suffocating silence, the truth, like a powerful, inescapable perfume, began to unfold. The investigation that followed was swift and brutal. The chemical analysis of the perfume, confirming the presence of cyanide. The empty vial from the rose garden, it stylized, a damning piece of evidence. Sofia's tearful testimony, corroborated by the house staff who had witnessed Eleanor's unusual presence in Layla's room. It all painted a horrifying, irrefutable picture. Eleanor Al-Fayed, driven by insatiable greed and a chilling desire for absolute control over the family fortune, had poisoned her own mother. The Al-Fayed dynasty crumbled, its gilded facade shattered by the very fragrance it had sought to preserve, by the very truth it had tried to bury. Zara Khan, the quiet perfumer, had become the unlikely architect of its downfall. I didn't seek revenge. I sought truth.
And
sometimes, the most powerful truths are not shouted from the rooftops, but whispered on the wind. They are carried in the delicate dance of molecules, in the silent signature of a scent. And in the end, the fragrance of a lie always betrays itself. My lab, once a sanctuary, now felt like a place of quiet triumph. The world still spoke to me in scents, but now, the narratives were clearer, the truths more resonant, stripped bare of their deceit. And I, Zara Khan, was finally at peace, knowing that I had not just created a perfume, but had uncovered a legacy, one molecule at a time, ensuring that justice, like a lingering fragrance, would finally prevail. The bitter almond, once a symbol of death, was now a reminder of truth. And the sweet scent of justice, finally, filled the air.